Right. So now I want to look at constructors, because according to our syllabus, this is what we have done. We have covered inheritance, single, multiple, and we are going to go a little bit deeper with inheritance in Unit 3, and also polymorphism, that's function overloading, operator overloading, overriding, all those things, abstract classes, interfaces. We're going to cover that in Unit 3. But right now, since we've covered all this, we need to cover constructors, right? So basically, a constructor is a member method of a class, which is invoked automatically when an object to the class is created. So every time you create an object, right after the new keyword, everything that comes after the new keyword is a constructor, right? A constructor name should be the same name as the class name. If your class name is program, like in this case, your constructor should be the same name, same cases. You see, as you know, C# is case sensitive, right? A constructor does not have any return type, right? It doesn't have any, even void, it doesn't have a return type, a constructor. A constructor is used to keep something ready for the object when it is created. So that's when you get the opportunity to initialize some items, right? Using your constructor, you can initialize some objects, right? For example, in this class diagram, we were getting input from the users. So rather than getting input from the users, we can as well create a constructor, right? We can create a constructor, and that constructor can initialize all these variables. So the constructor should bear the same name as the class. So here we remove this, and you remove the void because it doesn't return anything, the constructor. Then you write your brackets like this. This is the constructor, right? So I'm just going to do this, right? Right, so there are different types of constructors. There are different types of constructors according to our course outline here. We have got the default code constructor. This is the constructor that is generated by the system. You don't have to define it or declare it, because the system does that for you. And we also have user-defined default constructor, right? This is the one that is explicitly written by the programmer. The constructor doesn't accept any arguments or parameters, and this is the user-defined default constructor that I'm talking about. And there is no restriction to write particular code to the constructor, right? So you can write whatever you want to write inside the constructor. So let's take this code that we wrote before. I don't know where I put it, so I might need to rewrite it. So we want to implement this. This is what we want to implement. So all this will be available. The only difference is that we are not getting this from the user, but we are initializing it from the constructor. So let me quickly write it. Let me quickly write the code. Int emp id, right? Emp id, then string ename, employee name, then string address, then we want an integer here, int age, right? And then now we want to write our constructor. So our constructor is going to be like this. Our constructor, we are going to create our constructor, and we're going to use the same name, right? Except we're going to call it, we're going to give it an access modifier for public, so that it becomes a public. And since the name is program, we use the same name, program. Yeah, maybe before we do that, we might need to just change the name so that it makes sense as you write the code. Yes, please. Yes, please. Copy this. Write it here. Right. So in this constructor, we are going to initialize all these variables. All these variables are going to be initialized here. Emp ID is equals to, we can write a number of our own, our choice 0, and we can write 1, 0, 2, 0, right? Then we also need the ename. The ename is equals to, since it's the string, we can write Mr. Zara. Mr. Zara is the employee here. Then the address is also a string. Tito. Right. Then we need his age. Age equals to 47, right? Right. So this is how you write your constructor. Then after the constructor, we also need to display. We just need to display the details. So it's a public void, since we are not returning anything. Display emp details. Display emp details. What's happening here? Display emp details, right? We're displaying the employee details. So console dot write, because we want to write here. We want to write here. Is the employee ID is concatenate this dot emp ID, right? So now we need to copy all this. We need to copy this so that type. Now we need the name. Ename. Now we need the address. Address. Now we need the age. We need the age. Right. We've done this before, so it should not be a problem. So right now we need to create instantiate an object. Oh, sorry, I thought it was program. It's employees now. Employees emp is equal to new employees, right? Then we invoke. We need to invoke the display employee details, right? Basically, that is all we need. That is all we need to create our user defined constructor. Right? The constructor is taking care of things for us. Right? Here we only invoke this method, since it's the only method that we have anyway. So employee number 128, employee name Zara, address Lotito, age 47. So that's how you use a constructor. Right? You might want to create another object. Right? Now we are just experimenting. We are just tamba code and tingo not alpha. Right? Then here emp1 dot display, right? Run it. You see, it means each time you instantiate an object, it is going to print the same thing over and over and over again, right? You are going to discuss, is this an advantage or a disadvantage? You are going to discuss amongst yourself. So this is how a user-defined default constructor works. You might also want to know more about another type of constructor, which is known as the system-defined default constructor, because we talked about the user-defined default constructor. Now we need to know about the system-defined default constructor, right? The system-defined default constructor. So for a system-defined default constructor, we don't need to explicitly define the constructor like we did here. We are not going to declare the constructor. The system is going to do this for us, right? The system has already done this for us. So what the system does is, when you instantiate an object, the system is going to look for the constructor. If there is no constructor that has been explicitly written by the developer, the system would develop or will write the constructor for you. So we want to see what is going to happen in this code. There is no constructor in this code. We only initialized our variables, but we do not assign any values. So let's see how it's going to react. See how it's going to react. You see, this is how it reacts. It gives default values. So default values are going to be assigned by the system-defined default constructor, right? It is assigned zeros for integer. For strings, it is assigned null values, which means there is nothing in the strings. So this is how the system-defined constructor works. This is how it really works. So now we want to look at a different type of constructor, which is referred to as the parameterized constructor. So in parameterized constructor, you have to write your parameters within the constructor. You have to write your parameters within the constructor. So let me just write a code. Let me create a constructor here. Constructor, employees. Then I have to put some parameters. For example, here I have to write the parameters like ID. They come in form of variables, right? String, let's say string NME for name, right? Then string address, let's say ADD, right? Then string age, let's say it's just AG, right? Then this dot emp ID is going to be equal to variable ID, and this dot enum is going to be assigned a value that we get from NME. Then this dot address is going to be assigned a value that we get from ADD. Then this dot age is going to get a value assigned from AG, right? Sorry, this should not be a string, it should be an integer, right? You can see it's already complaining. So here, this is where you have to pass the values that are going to be assigned to these variables, and these variables are going to be used to assign the class variables, right? So here, the first value is supposed to be an ID, so we can write 100, comma. The second one is supposed to be a string, which is a name. We say Mr. Manza. Then we need the address, which is a string. Address here, Mr. Manza, we say Zara Bani, right? Then we need his age. Maybe his age is 51.